And welcome into the Tuesday Tackle alongside Johnny Becker and Aaron Catamaccio. Derek Decker bringing the action live from the second floor of Franklin Hall as we get you set for another edition here of the Tuesday Tackle. We'll jump right in. We'll start with IU football and their victory over Rutgers. I was on the call on the roof, and the first play was great, but I think it just set the tone. Raekwon Jones getting to Johnny Langan, the quarterback, forcing a strip sack and picking it up, scooping it in, and returning it for a touchdown in the quickest touchdown in the illustrious 50-plus year history of Memorial Stadium. Hoosiers went on to win 35-0. Rutgers had one passing yard. Was Rutgers that bad? Was this much of a challenge for Indiana? Or was the question, the takeaway maybe Indiana's better than we thought and potentially getting to more wins than we thought coming into the season?
Well, Rutgers is a really bad football team. They're the worst team in the Big Ten. And, Indiana did play very well. They scored 35 points. They shut Rutgers out, so they had 0 points. And Penix, played really, really well. He impressed me. He had 3 touchdowns. He was 20 of 29. So he was really efficient. And that's promising going into, future Big Ten games, future big games where you say, okay, maybe they can make, maybe a bowl game and maybe a better bowl game than just the 6 wins that they've been getting in the past couple years.
Yeah, and to continue with that, Indiana plays Maryland next week, and Maryland looked very shaky against Purdue. But going back to the Rutgers game real quick, I don't want to overreact from the game because, like you said, Johnny, Rutgers is not a great football team. They only have 1 win on the season and now 5 losses.
And they have a new coach, and you got to wonder how the players are reacting.
Exactly. So they're in a transitional type of period. Mm-hmm. But I will say, though, as you said, Michael Penix was very accurate, which was very important. And Stevie Scott finally had the big game we've been waiting for. He had 12 carries for 164 yards. And that's about 14 yards per carry, so that was pretty good to see. And like you said, Derek, they got off to a hot start with that defensive touchdown. And really going forward, Indiana needs to get on these hot starts because what happens generally is they get off to slow starts and then they just fall behind early. And in the Big Ten, that's just not going to work out for you. So for next week, hopefully Indiana can bring that same energy to a good Maryland football team.
Well, here's what it feels like to me, and I've been kind of thinking this the entire season, is Indiana, this team we've talked about, and I know we always talk about the feeling, but this Indiana team does feel different in the sense that they're able to beat teams handily that they should. This is a Rutgers team that's bad. The last time they came to Bloomington, they got shut out, which makes 8 straight quarters without a score in B-Town. But if you go back 2 years before that, in 2015 on homecoming, Indiana blows a 27-point lead and completely melts down in the fourth quarter and loses 55-52. You have to take that into consideration about where this program is at right now. They beat UConn, really should have shut out that opponent, which, basically you're looking at 3 almost shutouts. They shut out Eastern Illinois as well. The defense has been that good. But the point is they're racing out to hot starts. You don't get the anxious feeling in the third quarter as you slip over and now you can buy a stadium beer. You slip over and you buy that when Indiana's down 21-20 to South Carolina State in the third quarter. Like, that's not happening anymore. It's a totally different narrative. And even at Michigan State, we saw the same kind of thing. Thoughts on that? I don't know if it's just me seeing that or maybe I'm on to something bigger here.
No, I think you're right. And I think that the main factor is Michael Penix. And it's what he brings to the table. He brings so much. He's proven that he's an extremely accurate quarterback. He has a big arm. He can make those big plays that, IU has been lacking, since the Kevin Wilson days, really. And so you put that with a Tom Allen defense, which has struggled a little bit this year. But you can definitely see, some of the, Big Ten type defense that IU should be having. So you see Michael Penix, what he's able to do, and I think that's the biggest factor in how they can get to, one of the better bowl games than, like I said, just the 6-win, lower level bowl games. They can maybe get a mid-tier bowl game this year.
Yeah, I think they can definitely achieve that goal of getting a mid-tier bowl game. And like you said, I think the main difference is having Penix in at quarterback rather than Ramsey.
Mm-hmm.
And to answer your question, Derek, I get that feeling that this is a different football team when Penix is playing.
Mm-hmm.
When Ramsey's playing,
Yeah, that's
that
true.
old feeling comes back, and I just don't trust him. I think he's a good,
Mm-hmm.
solid quarterback, but I just think Penix is that much better, and he makes that much of a difference when he's on the field.
Right. I saw one of the projections today coming in of Indiana potentially being just outside of, playing on January 2nd in Florida against Auburn. That was one of the projections. That obviously it didn't go well the last time a Big Ten team played Auburn in a bowl game. You can ask folks on the other side of the state for that one. But anyway, the whole point is Indiana's getting to a point where it's like, now you have a favorable schedule, and I want to talk about that a little bit too as we preview Maryland. You're at a point in the season where you are sandwiched between 2 byes, and you have 4 winnable games. They just took care of Rutgers. You have Maryland, you have Nebraska on the road, then you have Northwestern, followed by another bye. And then it gets pretty tough down the stretch. You get Penn State on the road, Michigan at home, and then Purdue to finish it out. And Purdue looked a lot better this week. But this group of 4 games, and Tom Allen's talked about all season long, breaking down the season into quadrants, and Indiana, I would say, has passed the test through the first half of the season. Now you're talking about a team that's sitting here at 4-2. They go to Maryland. Basically a bowl eligibility play-in game, I think, because if Indiana wins this one, it's hard to believe that they wouldn't get another win going down the stretch. This has been a bowl eligibility play-in game in the past. The last time Indiana went to College Park didn't turn out well. These games have been shootouts. They've been dumb. They've been kind of weird. Last year, Indiana won with a couple minutes left on a justice field goal on a really, really cold day. Like, it's just kind of, you get that feel. But this Maryland team looks a little bit worse than we thought. Okay, they came out in the season. They started hot against Syracuse. They struggled against Temple. We saw them struggle against Penn State. And obviously they struggled last week against Purdue. That's pretty concerning for Terrapin fans. And then, again, you come in with an Indiana team that also feels different. Is this a game Indiana should win on the road handily? Is this a game they should control on the road? This is something we've seen them struggle with in the past, going on the road and struggling. Should they go to College Park and win comfortably?
I don't know if they'll win comfortably just because in the past the Maryland IU game has just been weird. There's some weird stuff that happens. So in that sense, I think they will win. I wouldn't necessarily say comfortably, but I think they'll win by, a decent margin where you can say, it was, a closer game than what the final score looked. But yeah, they should go into they should go into College Park and they should be able to get this one out because Maryland, they had that first week where they scored like 79 points or something like that.
Well, I was on Howard, an FCS team, but
exactly.
yes,
But
yes,
still, and
yeah.
everyone's thinking, okay,
They're still
maybe,
averaging 37 points a game,
Right.
for what it's worth.
right?
So.
But people are thinking, this Maryland team might be legit this year, and they're 3-3, and I think IU's a better football team. So I say Indiana goes in there and gets that win.
I'm actually going to pick Maryland to win this game just because of their
Really?
terrible loss last week. I think they're going to be a little
interesting.
fired up. They're at home.
Mm-hmm.
They
were fired up against Penn State and they lost 59-0. I mean, they brought out the entire student body. They canceled class on Friday and said, "Come watch this game," and they're blown out, and the game's over by the end of the first quarter. So that's an interesting take.
That's fair. Well, Penn State, though, to their credit, they're a
That's
top
true.
10.
That's true.
Yeah,
You're right
they
on
are-
that.
they
You're
are a
absolutely
lot
right
better
on that.
than-
That's
than
true.
But I get where you're coming from. I just don't trust Indiana at this point. I need a larger sample size.
That's fair.
Would winning at Maryland comfortably, would that give you confidence as a viewer? Would that say, now we've gotten over the hump to the point where it's like, I can trust this team going forward? Would a win do that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
Penix just needs to prove he's proven to me already he can play in this crowded Big Ten.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I want to see him on the road. He came up so short on Michigan State.
Right.
And, for a Big Ten quarterback, you have to be able to win or to do well in the Big Ten. You have to be able to lead that fourth quarter drive and lead your team over the top. And I know this is going to be a close game. I think we can all agree on that. So I want to see if Penix can really rally the troops up.
I think if there's one player that needs to prove something, it would be Stevie Scott. And it's just because I feel like IU needs to depend more on the running game in some of these Big Ten games. And obviously he had 164 yards and 12 carries against Rutgers, but that's against Rutgers. Against these big-time teams, he hasn't really done too much.
Right.
You know? If they can go into Maryland, they can set the tone with a running game and then have Penix to complement that, then you best believe that, you know, Indiana's going to come out with that win and with more confidence going into, you know, the bigger games.
Yeah. Also worth noting, and as far as addressing your run game concerns, it's an Indiana offensive line that's beat up. Coy Crunk's done for the season. Hunter Littlejohn went out, and we didn't see him come back. Tom Allen said yesterday that injury is likely not serious, so we should be able to see him in the next couple of weeks. But as all the moving parts come around on the offensive line, you really have to think about, well, establishing the run game didn't work when the offensive line was healthy to begin with. It didn't work really through the first 3 or 4 games of the season. We saw it get better. And again, they struggled against good competition. They didn't struggle against Rutgers. But they didn't even establish that, well, I didn't think, against UConn. Better, we saw progress, and Kalen DeBoer talked about that last week as well. But as far as going and getting the win in College Park before you go to Lincoln and play Nebraska, theoretically, and I'll ask you guys this question, Indiana comes back to Bloomington to play Northwestern on the 2nd of November. Is Indiana bowl eligible before they come back, meaning they win their next 2 games? Are they bowl eligible before they come back to Bloomington?
Who do they play before Northwestern?
You have Maryland this week and Nebraska next week.
Maryland, Nebraska. I would say yes.
Okay.
I think they beat Nebraska. I really do.
I do too.
Nebraska, you know, they're up and down. They can have a really good game and they can have a really bad game. You never really know what's going to happen with them. And I think IU, if they get this win against Maryland, they have this momentum going. Michael Penix has every week has gotten better. Every week you've seen his accuracy improve. You've seen his game management improve. And I think that they can go in and they can, really test Nebraska and get that win. And then, I think Northwestern's a win too. So I think they'll obviously be bowl eligible at that point.
I think they'll be bowl eligible after they play Northwestern.
Fair enough. That's
because
fair.
I'm predicting them to lose to Maryland, but I think they'll absolutely beat Nebraska.
Okay. Well, in any case, if Indiana comes back to Bloomington and beats Northwestern, they're 7-2, and you're probably talking about knocking on the door of the top 25, which is something that hasn't been talked about around here in 25 years. So, there's some exciting things going on.
Then they got Purdue, which
you have Purdue at the end of the year. I mean, and we talked about, and actually right now, that Michigan game in the computer is going to be a virtual toss-up in S&P. So, and then the only loss.
Michigan's played well these past couple weeks.
You're right, and we're going to talk about that. But the S&P really, really likes Indiana. So this 9-win thing that everybody was talking about at the beginning of the season, not that far-fetched at this point. It's really not. It's actually not. I mean, we're still at a point where we're halfway through the season, and this thing can completely fall apart in Indiana football fashion. And it very well. And how many times have we said that? Right. How many times have we seen it? But it certainly feels different. So we're gonna go with that, and we'll take a look at the rest of the Big Ten. We touched on Nebraska, maybe not living up to the hype. Scott Frost had things look like, oh wow, this team's going to be pretty good this year. A lot of talking heads thought so. Minnesota's 6-0. They beat them 34-7 this week. So 2 questions arise out of that. We already talked about Nebraska maybe not being so good. Is Minnesota the real deal? Because guess what? Right now, Minnesota is in the playoff conversation. They're not out of the playoff. I mean, they're not. You obviously can't put them in anywhere close to the top teams at this point. But the point is, their schedule isn't that tough. They play in the Big Ten West. And if they're able to go like 11-1 in the regular season and make it to the Big Ten Championship, basically it's all going to come down to whether they can beat Wisconsin or not.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, is this a legit thing? PJ Fleck might have it going on.
Well, I was a fan of PJ Fleck when he was at Western Michigan. I don't know how you couldn't be. When he chose the Minnesota job, everyone was kind of scratching their head, like, why would you go there? Obviously, they're 6-0 right now. He's done a great job building the program, but I'm with you. I don't know if they are legit or not. They haven't really played any big time team.
No.
So I mean, all these wins are from fairly easier teams. But yeah, I mean, you're right. It comes down to that Wisconsin game and whether we can say they're legit or not. But yeah, Minnesota's a tough team to judge because they've never really been in the spotlight ever. And
That's fair.
They're not really on TV a whole lot, and it's the Big Ten whenever they are. So. I've never really watched them this year, but yeah, I don't know, honestly.
I'm gonna list out the teams who they've beaten so
please
far.
do, because this is gonna be fun.
So it's South Dakota State, Fresno State, Georgia Southern, Purdue, Illinois, Nebraska, and then they get Rutgers this week. So
It's just
not good.
unbelievable. Like, yeah, I want that schedule one time. Like, everybody talks about how easy Indiana's schedule is and the non-conference is great. But then you turn around and play Ohio State, and Minnesota's sitting here and playing Illinois, Nebraska, and Rutgers to start, and Purdue to start the freaking Big Ten slate. Are you kidding me? Like, that's awesome. I want that. I want that one time.
yeah, I'd love that too. This has UCF's schedule written all over it from last year to me because I haven't watched Minnesota, so I don't have a strong opinion. But just based off
they have
that,
that one really good receiver, that Tyler Johnson kid.
yeah,
He's good.
That
He's
kid
really
is good.
He was
He can
good
ball.
he was really good last year. I remember that.
in terms of running the table and getting to the Big Ten championship, I mean, they still have to play Penn State, Iowa, Northwestern.
But they get Penn State at home, and in fact, they get Penn State and Wisconsin at home. They only have to go to Iowa, and Iowa hasn't looked vulnerable the last couple of weeks.
Minnesota
They didn't look great again. I mean, there was zero offense in that Penn State-Iowa game this week. So it's doable because then you also have Northwestern and Maryland. Like, unbelievable. I can't believe the crossover games. Like, seriously, their draw in the East was Maryland and Rutgers.
The two worst
Are you
teams.
serious? Like, that's just amazing. Like, I want that.
yeah, I'm predicting them to get, at best, 10th in the country. But I don't see them making a run at the playoff just because there's so many better teams out there.
I will explain to you why they are clown fraud trash. Because this team, I actually watched that entire South Dakota State game. Unbelievably. I know, whatever. But it was a Thursday night, I think, is what it was. And it was week 1, and I had nothing else to do. It's 28-21, okay? Minnesota trailed in the fourth quarter of that game. Guess what other game they trailed in? Fresno. They've trailed in that game. They trailed in the Georgia Southern game until the last 10 seconds.
Got to row the boat.
I'm just telling you,
gotta
this
row the
team,
boat.
there is zero evidence to believe that this is a good team. And pathetically, Michigan had a smaller margin of victory over Illinois than Minnesota because, it's Michigan and Jim Harbaugh sucks. So that's just like, I don't know. Like, I don't understand how to describe this team because Nebraska sucks too, and Minnesota just isn't any good. They just had a really, really nice schedule workout, and you just don't see things like that happen in the Big Ten hardly ever like that. I mean, that's just amazing.
But I mean, hey, good for them.
It is good for them. I don't really care. I mean, whatever.
Game.
Indiana went there and blew that game last year, so I don't really want to talk about it on a Friday night. It's just unwinnable to go to TCF Bank Stadium and win on a Friday night. That's impossible. Okay. As we look at the rest of the Big Ten, the important stuff in the Big Ten, Penn State beats Iowa 17-12 this week. Zero offense in that game, but the implications go far. Iowa's out of the playoff for sure. They're out. They're done.
Right, they're done.
Penn State, not done. Penn State looks pretty good. Is this a real contending team?
I mean, I guess they are a real contending team, but obviously you have to go through Ohio State, and Ohio State is the contender in the Big Ten, and because of that, I don't think Penn State will make the playoffs.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with you. I think Ohio State is the best team in the country. I'm just going to say it. And
I agree with you on
I
that.
would agree.
And people are going to overreact this week when Penn State kills Michigan. And I'm not going to be on that wagon because I just know Michigan chokes. And Jim Harbaugh will be on the hot seat even more
They
after
choke
this
every
week.
time.
So I still like Ohio State, but Penn State could definitely be in the conversation. I'm not counting them out. It's just
They're in the conversation. They're not in the conversation.
The
Does that
top
make sense?
four.
Yeah, that's
Yes.
fair. That's a great way to put it.
they're always
That's a
in the
great way to put
mix,
it.
Yeah.
is what I'm trying to say.
Right.
So if they can beat Ohio State, though, then we'll take them seriously.
Yeah.
Okay. Wisconsin blew out Michigan State, who we personally, after watching Lewerke and how he worked against a solid Indiana defense, not great, but solid.
Played really
Okay.
well.
And in fact, right now, a top 25 Indiana defense. Oh, yeah, I forgot to mention, Indiana's 25th in the S&P rankings this week. So whenever you refer to Indiana, you must refer to them as number 25 Indiana. Just want to point that out. All right. So if you look at Michigan State, this Lewerke guy, who is a pretty unproven quarterback. He's been middling in the Big Ten for a couple of years now, but he kind of has that capability about him where you think, okay, maybe this guy's actually not that bad. They get shut out against a good Wisconsin defense who messed around with Northwestern last week, a bad team. So what do you think about Wisconsin? Like, what are our thoughts on that? I mean, Wisconsin has messed around a couple of times. They always mess around with Northwestern. Their offense isn't that good, but their defense is really, really good. Are they a contender too?
They're in the same boat as Penn State. You have to be a Ohio State to get into
All right.
the playoffs.
So let me ask you this then: why do we think of Ohio State as in the conversation? Like we've been talking about this entire time. Like Ohio State's beaten nobody either.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have any good wins. But I think you could probably make an argument that just from the eye test, they look really good.
Yeah.
So is that what we're thinking here? Is
Yes.
that we're
It's
okay?
the eye test. It's also the what they've done in past years. It's who they've
Fair enough.
recruited. It's who they have on their team.
They
It's
definitely have the most
Justin
talent
Fields.
out of
exactly.
right,
It's,
right.
Obviously, they don't have Urban Meyer anymore, but they still have most of the same coaching staff. So you
Right.
have that going for them. So that's why I look at Ohio State and I say that's the team in the Big Ten that if they're going to have a team, it's going to be them.
Yeah, I like Ohio State as well. In terms of Wisconsin, I was kind of surprised that they were ranked below Penn State because I actually think Wisconsin's a better football team overall. That defense has allowed 29 points through 6 games.
Mm-hmm.
That's about 10. It's less than 10 points a game.
Yeah.
So that defense is really the difference maker. I just still have an issue with the quarterback.
Yeah.
I know what I'm going to get out of
They're a
Jonathan
one-trick
Taylor.
pony. All they can do is run the ball with
Yep.
Jonathan Taylor. Now, Jonathan Taylor, obviously,
Yeah,
can make plays.
right. It's more than that, but yes.
It's hard when you're going to go against, Ohio State, and they have all these athletes that are faster than every other player on Wisconsin, and they're more physical. And Jonathan Taylor won't be able to catch the edge, and he won't be able to make those big plays, and you're going to have to rely on that quarterback. That quarterback can't make the plays.
Mm-hmm.
So
Exactly.
that's the problem with Wisconsin. They have that great defense, but can their offense score the points so that their defense can win them?
I said it last week. They remind me so much of the Chicago Bears in the NFL.
That's actually a great comparison. I really
really
like that.
is.
I do.
Like, they have the defense. They have the playmakers. Their offensive line is great. It's just the quarterback position. It amazes me how they can't get that piece because they're a big-time program, and they've been
for
good
sure.
year after year.
Yes,
It
they
reminds me of Michigan with Shea Patterson.
The one year they had a quarterback was Russell Wilson, and they won the
Yeah.
Rose Bowl.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And he was a transfer, too. He
was a
came
transfer,
over from
right.
NC State, so they didn't have him for that long.
Right.
No.
All right, we're going to take a quick break, and we're going to come back and talk about the rest of college football along with the NFL. All of that coming up on the Tuesday Tackle. And welcome back into our WIUX studios, Tuesday Tackle. Derek Decker, Johnny Becker, Aaron Catamaccio bringing it to you here from the second floor of Franklin Hall. As we get back to our discussion on college football, we take a look at a couple of the more interesting games around the country from this past weekend. And obviously the one that jumps off the page is Georgia beating South Carolina, or Georgia losing to South Carolina 20-17, double overtime. Just a disaster in overtime, really, for both teams. I mean, the kicking was bad. It was not a good game, and it just, I think, shows you how bad Georgia played to lose to South Carolina.
Right.
Now, obviously they're not done yet. Okay, they have one loss. They're playing in the SEC. They're never out of it. Really, not even with 2 losses. I mean, if things go right, if the chips fall right, they could potentially make it with 2 losses. That loss would probably have to come in the SEC championship. But this is a really, really, really bad loss.
Right.
What are the concerns for Georgia going forward? Do you trust this team still has a chance to make the playoff?
Well, they still have a chance because of their talent.
Right.
They have 13 5-stars on their team. And when you look at those 5-stars, they are very athletic. They are some of the top players in the country. Their problem is their coach. And this is gonna cause a little bit of controversy. Kirby Smart is top 2 recruiter in the country. Nick Saban's probably number 1. Kirby Smart's number 2.
Yeah, I don't think anybody argues that.
Right. He gets whatever player he wants and battles with Nick Saban for every other player. Now, the problem with Kirby is he's not a very good, overall coach. You saw it last year when he, what was the punt on 4th down with Justin Fields?
Right.
He makes stupid calls like that. He hasn't really made any progress from where Georgia was with Mark Richt, and we can safely say that Mark Richt was not a very good coach either. He just had a lot of good talent.
Yeah.
And so that's the worry with Georgia. But he has talent. He has Jake Fromm, who is a tremendous leader, a tremendous college quarterback. He has defense. and he has playmakers on offense. And when you have a recipe like that, you can win a lot of games. I just can't see them, beating an LSU or beating an Alabama because they don't have it at the top. Kirby Smart is not going to be able to outcoach Nick Saban, and he's not going to be able to figure out a way to stop Joe Burrows and that lethal offense that they have. So, Aaron, that's my take. But Georgia, I don't think, they have a tremendous team. They just don't have the coaching staff.
I think that Georgia didn't lose last week because of coaching. I actually thought it was because of effort. I thought they walked into that game saying, this is an easy opponent.
Don't you think that's a coaching issue,
well, yeah,
issue,
I think some of it does.
I think that also starts
with
the leader in Jake Fromm. He did not have a great game.
Fair.
He threw a lot of interceptions.
He didn't have a good game.
Also, their other leader is arguably their kicker. He is one of the best kickers in college football, and that special teams unit is good. I know that sounds a little weird, but he does not miss. He's like the Rams kicker.
He's got magnifying glasses on his
I know. He looks a little goofy, but he makes
everything.
He is a good.
Bro.
And
he's got tacky.
He's got a great name too. Blankenship's a great name. Yeah. I don't know. I love kickers, so whatever.
Going forward, I still like Georgia a lot better than LSU, better than Florida.
Better than LSU?
Wow,
Yeah.
That was good. That was nice. You've got a couple takes today that you have some business explaining here.
I know.
Maryland's going to be IU, and LSU isn't as good as Georgia. So please explain that. Let's talk about that.
I think Georgia has the better
talented.
defense.
That's what I think.
And I think the difference is Burrow versus Jake Fromm. I would rather have Jake Fromm any day of the week in a head-to-head matchup.
I would agree with you because I think that if Fromm was on an LSU team with all those weapons that they have, they have Jamar Chase and what's his name? Justin Jefferson, I think his name is. They have a stable of running backs. They have a lethal offensive line that can just pancake everybody. If you put Fromm on that LSU team, oh my gosh, Fromm would be thrown for however many yards he wants to.
Okay, I have another point though I'd like to make.
Okay, all right. There you go.
I'm just saying, LSU's offense, I saw it against Florida, is lethal.
We'll see it when it happens. We'll let the playing
defense.
do the talking. But if you reverse the Notre Dame game with the South Carolina game, I don't think this is even a conversation. We can't forget that Georgia outplayed a good Notre Dame football team. And they've also beat some other decent
Who else has
teams.
Notre Dame played?
I was just about to say,
who else has Notre Dame?
They almost lost to Virginia, and Virginia lost to Miami this week.
Yeah.
I'm not doing the transitive property thing, that's dumb, but
They beat Virginia by 15 though. That's
okay.
not...
But it was they were down in the fourth quarter. Virginia was up a point.
I'm
going to
say this. Okay. Hot take. If Georgia and South Carolina would have played, if Georgia and LSU would have played this week instead of Florida and LSU, Georgia would have been blown out way more than Florida was.
All right.
Because I don't think Georgia doesn't have the corners that can keep up with those two wide receivers that LSU has.
Right.
Those two wide receivers are something else. They high point the ball very well. They run tremendous routes, and they have a quarterback that throws an extremely accurate, catchable ball. And Georgia does not have. They don't have the pass rush, and they don't have the secondary that can match up with that LSU offense. And I don't think any team in the league, in the nation, does. The only team that might be able to contend with them is, in the SEC at least, is Alabama that can throw them out of the playoffs. And that's because Alabama has two wide and those really four dynamic wide receivers.
Fair enough.
All right.
That's just my opinion. I think Florida goes in there in I think it's 3 weeks because I think Florida gets that bye afterwards. I think Florida goes there and gets the dub. I really do. I think it's going to be by 2 touchdowns. Because Kyle Trask right now is playing like Jake Fromm did last year.
Okay, so we're gonna move on from the SEC discussion, and we're gonna turn to something else. I have a significant problem here. Okay, please explain to me why Clemson is third and Ohio State's fourth right now. Please explain that one to me, and if you can make a justified case, maybe I'll change my mind.
Because Clemson won the national championship last year, and that's the
Yeah,
only
but they
reason
look
why. They play
terrible
in
a couple games.
They
They played
play
in a
in an
horrible
awful conference. They play in an awful conference. They haven't really beaten anybody.
looked horrible
They
against North
really
Carolina.
haven't looked good against very many
Should
teams.
have lost to North Carolina.
Florida State is an awful team. They are so bad.
Oh, yeah.
And
Oh,
they
they're
beat them
horrible.
45-14. Oh my gosh, it should have been more. Oh my gosh, Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, but
Trevor
okay,
Lawrence
yeah,
threw
but
for
if it was-
170 yards in that game.
Ah.
You got to be kidding me. You got to be kidding me. If you're trying to be
Also-
a top 5 team, you can't. Oh my god, your quarterback can't be throwing for 170 yards against a Florida State team that has absolutely no motivation
No,
at
zero,
all.
none.
Their head coach is the worst coach in college football, except for maybe Chip Kelly. But Chip
Yeah, but
Kelly
he doesn't
has,
even count.
Chip
He
Kelly
doesn't
has
even count.
at least proven himself a little bit. You know, like
Yeah, he doesn't.
He's been to a national championship,
That's
but
true.
that was with another team. So
Past
I'd say
success.
Willie Taggart is much worse than Chip Kelly, and Florida State they have no motivation. They don't they don't care. All Willie Taggart cares about is recruiting, and that's falling apart. So I don't know your guys' opinions on that because I don't think Clemson's that good.
Was Clemson at number 2 last week?
Yes.
Yeah, now they're number
Okay.
3.
They're 3 in the AP poll. They're actually ahead of LSU in the coaches poll. They're actually 2 in the
Okay.
coaches poll, and LSU's 3.
Oh my gosh.
Well,
Which is just
for
unbelievable,
the AP
like-
poll.
Yes.
I understand why that they weren't moved down from 2 to 4 because that's a big gap, 2 spots in the top 4. And
They
okay,
haven't
but you
proven
don't.
anything.
That's yeah.
look, no, I agree with you guys. Ohio State is the way better team. I'm just saying the logic behind it because Clemson, yeah, they won the national championship last year, so people are afraid to knock them down. But
Yeah.
we're
Why are
here
we
saying
afraid?
that they're
Yeah.
Why
not
are
that
writers
good.
afraid to
I
knock
think
them down?
I think here's the biggest thing. When the playoff rankings come out, Clemson will be no higher than 4.
Okay.
I think Clemson
Well,
should actually
Because
be ranked.
Well,
because
what
they're
can
gonna
happen-
have
okay.
Alabama. They're gonna have Alabama, LSU, and Ohio State before them. Because the playoff polls, or the playoff rankings are always much different than the AP rankings.
Right. That's true. That's true.
So I don't see Clemson being higher than 4.
Okay. Well, here's the deal too. They go to Louisville this week, and that could actually be really, really interesting because Louisville beat Wake Forest, who has had a great start, hadn't lost before this week, and they beat them in a shootout, 62-59. And Louisville's looked pretty good against some decent competition this year. Okay.
Right.
I mean, I don't know. I don't necessarily say I'm going to believe in this team. They looked pretty good against Notre Dame in week 1 at home, and that's really the only other good team they've played except for Wake Forest.
But they
Th-
put 62.
They had a horrible
they put
loss.
62 up though.
Yes, but they had a horrible loss to Florida State, which is very, very concerning. They had a horrible two-score loss on the
Yeah.
road at Florida State.
That's at Florida State, but
They've beaten Eastern Kentucky. They've beaten Western Kentucky. They've beaten a really bad Boston College team by 2 points. So there's a potential that this is just a fluke. But that said, if you can score
It
62 points,
Yeah.
like that keeps you in the conversation no matter what. That kind of gives you an old Kevin Wilson IU football feel where it's like, okay, maybe you're actually not that good, but you can get in the track meet and you can keep up. Okay, you can find a way to score some points and you find yourself in the end in the game. In the last.
the name
couple
of the
minutes
game is to score more points than the other team.
Yes, absolutely. So that could get really tricky for Clemson, but I think it's just ridiculous that they are ahead of Ohio
Yeah.
State anyway, and especially ahead of LSU, given what we just saw this last week. That's just
LSU
it's just no. There's no business for that to happen.
LSU is good, man.
LSU is really good.
I
But
was not
I just,
expecting that, bro. They ran, I think it was like 40 something plays, and they scored 40 points.
42 points.
Yeah, I think they ran 47 plays. I'm gonna have to fact check that, but yeah,
Well,
that's crazy.
Again, here's the deal. Now you have
That was a top 5 Florida defense.
well. I mean, I'm nobody's. It's
I'm
just,
just saying-
they are.
I'm just saying,
they are
LSU's
really good.
good,
They are
man.
really good. And
Oh my gosh.
they're finally having another good year because it feels like they're always that team that's like could have a really, really good year,
Yeah.
and they never do.
Yeah.
Well, the last 6 or 7 years, they haven't been
Orgeron's
that
proven
team.
me wrong. I
So-
thought he was.
True.
I didn't think he was that good of a coach coming
That's
in.
true.
I mean,
Orgeron's, yeah,
if you
that's
saw
right.
what he did at Ole Miss back in the day,
Mhm.
yikes. I mean, I was surprised that LSU even hired him.
Right.
But I'll tell you what, he has that locker room, and they believe. And that's the biggest thing.
Fair enough.
They believe.
And the last stop in college football, Oklahoma won the Red River Showdown. Basically, not a whole lot to discuss there. That actually wasn't a very entertaining game in the first half. Got more exciting in the second half. But Oklahoma Texas is out now.
Right.
I mean, there's just really nothing else to take from that. I think that was probably the play-in game for the Big 12. I think that was. Now you're always going to have in the Big 12. Even though this is a really, really deep league this year, it's not the top tier talent. It's kind of like what we see in the Big 10, especially in the East, where it's like you have this group of teams that are solid and good. They're not playoff contending good, but they're like 20s, 30s good, where you don't have some really, really bad teams. So the Big 12 doesn't have that problem this year. They're getting one team in if they get any at all. I don't think there's a whole lot of disagreement about that. Mm-hmm. Michigan at Penn State this week. We talked about that a little bit. If Penn State wins that, maybe the noise gets a little louder behind the Jim Harbaugh thing. We'll see. I still think Indiana. Oh, by the way, Indiana beat Michigan in soccer on Sunday. That's the first time they'll beat them in football this year. They will beat them again when they come to town on November 23rd. And unfortunately, I was looking at the schedule for that week. It's a really weak slate of games. Like, it won't be game day because Penn State's playing Ohio State that week. So that's where game day will be. But I'm thinking like a 3:30 ABC feel. Like, I don't know. I kind of have this. They're going to win that game. I'm just telling you, Indiana's going to win that game. Penix is going to throw for like 350 yards.
Yeah.
And Stevie Scott's going to run for 165 more. So they're definitely winning that game.
Wow.
There's just no doubt about that. You can mark that down. They're going to win that game.
That's going to be a good game.
Okay, please do, because hold me to that. All right. So the last thing I want to talk about is through the NFL, we'll do our weekly quick round, our lightning round. Mm-hmm. Although I do want to talk about, I think the most important thing on this doc is Jason Garrett. Okay, The Cowboys and the Rams have both started 3-3. All right, this is obviously both teams are underachieving at this point. Is he actually in trouble? Like, is this a real thing?
I believe he's always on the hot seat just because he's on
comes with the added pressure
America's
being with the Cowboys, right?
The Cowboys. But I'm a Giants fan, and I hate to admit this. The Dallas Cowboys have the most talented roster in the NFC. I'm just gonna say it, and they are not playing like it.
No,
they have the defense now. That linebacking core is scary. That secondary is getting better. It's not perfect. They have Ezekiel Elliott. They have a full, healthy offensive line now. And they have a good quarterback in Dak Prescott. You can say what you want about him, but Dak Prescott gets you wins. Yes, he struggles against the top quarterbacks in the league. He's I think now 11-18 against winning teams, but I think that has to do with the coaching. I don't think it has to do with Dak, because Dak plays in close games. He's not getting blown out in these games.
Sure.
And to me, Jason Garrett just gives me a weird feel. Like, their offense isn't dynamic. It's just a bunch of slant routes. It's just hand it off to Zeke, keep feeding him the ball, and occasionally throw a deep route to Amari Cooper. Like, it's been the same for the last 5 years, even going back to Des Bryant. They have always had this one primary receiver, one primary running back in DeMarco Murray years back.
Right.
It's the same offensive scheme year after year. And yes, you are occasionally going to make a wild card spot, or you're going to win the NFC East. But you have one playoff win in the last 20 years.
Yeah. And this is not a very good NFC this year.
And
so
this is a
competitive. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
And the NFC East isn't that great either.
No.
The Redskins and Giants both stink. The Eagles have struggled.
Yeah, the Eagles haven't looked very good either.
I think the Cowboys might have to look at some other options.
Okay.
Yeah, I would agree with that wholly. Jason Garrett has had Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones has had Jason Garrett's back ever since he hired him. He was his guy, and he just really hasn't gotten the results. He's had good seasons. He's, had some good players, but it's like every time they have a good season, they drop off. And I think it's just time for them to move on, get someone else, and see if that works, because obviously something's not working.
All right, now, with that said, we enter our lightning round. Patriots beat the Giants 35-14 on Thursday. Patriots continue to win sloppy games. They're undefeated 6-0. Chances at running the table.
I don't like their chances at running the table just because they play the Chiefs, and I figure they'll lose one other game on their schedule. I'm not sure against who. It's weird that I'm saying this, but I'm going to doubt him a little bit in Tom Brady. He just hasn't looked the same as he usually does. And he's looked great, don't get me wrong. He's just not dominant anymore, and that team's become a defensive team. They lead almost every category in points per game allowed, rushing yards allowed, passing yards. Their defense is extremely dominant, and against that Giants team, they only let up 14 points, had a couple of interceptions. They had a defensive touchdown where they blocked a punt. I mean, this defense is by far, in my opinion, the best. I mean, you could put the 49ers up there, but I really think that Tom Brady and the offense needs to play a little bit better if they want to run the table.
Okay, Panthers beat Bucs 37-26. Jameis Winston turned it over 6 times in a great game in London. That was fun. The Bucs are now 2-4 after beating the Rams in a 55-point explosion of offense. Panthers and McCaffrey looked pretty good.
Right, and Kyle Allen is 5-0 and it was all of his starts. Maybe, Cam Newton isn't the guy that the Panthers want anymore. But yeah, Christian McCaffrey obviously is an MVP candidate. I'd put him number 1 right now. The Panthers are a really good football team, and I would expect them to win the NFC South.
I think this is a hot take, but the Panthers have to move on from Cam Newton just because of how high his value is.
Right.
That's true. That's very true.
They could
That's
trade him, and
point.
they could get some real good picks.
And an AFC executive, they didn't specify whose name, said that 10 teams would be interested.
And I don't doubt that
Cam.
a bit. Yeah.
I mean, he's a former MVP. He led the team to a Super Bowl not that long ago. He definitely has the talent.
There are definitely some teams that need a quarterback.
But also, for Ron Rivera's sake, this is a year where he's got to win. And he can't put Cam Newton out there with a bad shoulder and a guy who just keeps getting injured. So I think they have to roll with Kyle Allen for the rest of the season.
He's been playing well.
Seahawks beat the Browns 32-28 after rallying past the Browns. Will the Browns make the playoffs?
No, because I like the Bills more. I like the Ravens. I like the Chargers to turn it around.
Really?
I like the Chiefs.
Okay.
I'm going to throw in the Oakland Raiders. Can't count them out. And then
That's true.
the AFC South with the Colts, Texans, Jaguars, and Titans. I think 2 or 3 teams could make it from that division.
Yeah.
And I think only the Ravens will make the playoffs from the Browns division. I don't see the Steelers or Bengals doing anything.
They're done.
Okay, that sums it up pretty quick. Texans, speaking of, beat the Chiefs 31-24. Are we concerned about Patrick Mahomes and the offense? Andy Reid has a tendency to start fast and kind of trail off towards the end of the year. Is this one of those years?
No, they'll be fine. They've lost 2 games. It's okay. It's the NFL. You can lose 2 or 3 games and still make the playoffs. But going back to what I said last year, the Texans as a legitimate Super Bowl contender, I think they proved it this week. Deshaun Watson, I said it with Christian McCaffrey, and Deshaun Watson could be an MVP candidate.
Vikings beat the Eagles 38-20. Kirk Cousins, 22 of 29 for 333 yards, 4 touchdowns. Time to believe in Kirk Cousins?
Nope. He cannot win in the big-time moments. This is a team that is destined for 8-8 or 9-7. I don't see it happening.
Saints beat the Jags 13-6 in a defensive struggle. Should we be concerned about the Saints? Obviously, the Jags are not looking, at this point, look like they're going to compete for a playoff spot unless they are able to turn around towards the end of the year. Teddy Bridgewater looks pretty good. Is he going to hold the water before Drew Brees comes back?
Oh, it looks like the Minshew magic is starting to die down a little bit, but I wouldn't necessarily be surprised if the Jaguars start winning a few games. The Saints are legit. Teddy Bridgewater has been playing pretty well, but I do think once Drew Brees comes back that he's going to be sitting on the bench, and expect a trade for Teddy Bridgewater after he sits.
Yeah, I actually think the Saints are the best team in the NFL right now, just because they're playing at a level right now with Teddy Bridgewater, and they're playing so well. Just imagine when they get back Drew Brees. They're going to have that offense back, and that defense is really, really good.
More surprising this week, Niners beating the Rams or Packers getting complete help from the officials to beat the Lions last night.
I'm a Packers fan, or I cheer for the Packers, and so I'm going to let that one go. I'm going to say more surprising was the Rams loss because I thought they were better than the 49ers, but the 49ers proves that they are a team. a team to be looking out for in the playoffs.
The 49ers only allowed 79 passing yards to the offensive mastermind in Sean McVay and Jared Goff. I mean, this team is legit. Don't sleep on the Niners.
Well, unfortunately, that is the end of our time for this week, and I wish we had 2 hours, but we don't. So we'll have to be. You'll have to join us again next week. And as we say goodbye, on behalf of Johnny Becker, Aaron Conamaccio, our sports director Mark Timko, this is Derek Decker saying so long and God bless.